Morning, Chairman.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. My name is Councillor Tom Smith. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Board and will be chairing this session in the absence of the Chairman, Councillor Stokes. Can I remind you all that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council website, and all comments will remain accessible online. And I would also like to welcome members of the public who are watching this meeting today. At this point, as there is no Vice Chairman, I'd like to propose Councillor Hall for this meeting only to be my Vice Chairman. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Key. Councillor Hall, if you would be so kind to up here, that would be most appreciated. I'd like to also welcome the senior leadership team who are present, which is Debbie Barnes, Chief Executive, and Andrew Crookham, Deputy Chief Executive and Executive Director for Resources. I'd also like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the doors behind you and leave the building through the reception into the front car park, where we will need to wait for further instructions. Can I also remind everybody to turn their laptops and mobile devices, iPads, etc., and put them on silent during the meeting. Also, when invited to speak, can you please ensure that you switch on your microphone? Otherwise, those attending the meeting via Teams and the members of the press and public who are potentially watching the meeting via the webcast and online won't be able to hear what you're saying. Please be aware you'll need to speak directly into the microphone so that your comments can be picked up. Request to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman for this meeting, which is Councillor Hall. If you wish to speak during the meeting, can you please raise your hand, and Councillor Hall will make a note for me for those who wish to speak. I'll now move on to the formal agenda. Apologies for absence and replacement members. Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Macy, Councillor Carrington, Councillor Stokes, Councillor Brockway, Emile van der Zee and Paul Brewster. And we have Councillor Sear replacing Councillor Brockway and Councillor Ashton replacing Councillor Stokes for this meeting only.
Thank you. Do any members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? Seeing none, I will move on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of October 2024. This is to confirm that and sign the minutes that they are an accurate record and reflection of the meeting that took place. Can I have a proposer and seconder for those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Key, and thank you, Councillor Kendrick. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? And abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. I will sign those later. Chairman's, I have no announcements to make today for the meeting, but we do have a heavy agenda, which includes the consideration of 4 pre-decision scrutiny items. I would therefore like to remind all presenters that members have reviewed the reports in advance of this meeting, thus I kindly ask you focus solely on summarising the key points and clarifying the specific input and decisions sought from the board to ensure efficient use of our time and so that debate can take place in a thorough manner. The executive councillors aren't present at the moment, so I'll come back to that. Should they
yes, Chairman, if I could.
Yes, of course. Apologies.
Yeah, I will be there, but I can't quite make it yet. So just to say that the one announcement I've got is that we received the confirmation letter from the Secretary of State that the Mayor Combined Authority procedure is now going through. The orders have been laid in Parliament, which means that we are on target for the creation of a mayoral combined authority or combined authority in March, followed by the elections for a mayor in next May. The other thing in terms of governmental, we are also expecting the white paper, the devolution white paper next week, which will confirm some of the rumours about just how far-reaching it will be in terms of not only devolution but also structures of local government. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Chief Officer announcements. Are there any Chief Officer announcements? No. Okay. Consideration of call-ins. Do we have any call-ins?
None received.
Thank you, Tom. And do we have any consideration of councillor calls for action?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Moving on to the substantive agenda. The first item is item 7, which is the Corporate Plan Success Framework 24-25 Quarter 2. The actions of the board are to consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendation to the executive set out on page 16 and agree that our comments be passed to the executive in relation to this item. This report will be presented by Caroline Jackson, Head of Corporate Performance. Over to you, Caroline.
Thank you, Chairman. As we've said, this is a quarter 2 report, so up to the end of September. I'd say it's showing strong performance across the majority of the areas covered, and I'll go into those just in a little bit of detail. As you know, we have activities and key performance indicators that we use to monitor the progress of our corporate plan. In terms of activities in quarter 2, we were reporting on 34 activities. None of those activities have been rated by the lead officers as red, so really, really positive to see that. We have 32 of the 34, or 94%, are progressing as planned, so are green RAG rated. All of the detail of all of those in the narrative are in the full report and online. The 2 activities that are rated amber, and just to remind you that does mean that one milestone may be slightly behind. It may be a number of different milestones within that activity, but it could be just one that's actually behind plan. Those are, the first one is A13, which is around working with our districts and other partners to develop our extra care and community supported living accommodation strategy. Again, work is ongoing to progress this, but it's just slightly behind where expectations were in terms of quarter 2. The second activity is around working with partners across our integrated care system to deliver shared strategic priorities. Again, some good progress has been made, but there have been some delays in the development of the intermediate care strategy. However, the dementia strategy has been written, and also we're working on the delivery of older persons strategy, so a mixture of sort of progress. Just to remind those, we also did report activity 65 as amber rated in quarter 1. This is now green, and that was obviously around the devolution and the creation of the Greater Lincolnshire Combined Authority. In terms of key performance indicators, there are 24 that we report on, where we have a target or ambition set. Of these, 83% are either exceeding or achieving their targets, so again, a really positive picture. 8 of the KPIs that were exceeding in quarter 1, of those 6 are still doing so, but I'll just pick up the 2 new ones that we're reporting in quarter 2 that are exceeding. The first one is an annually reported measure around the percentage of children with education, health and care plans in a mainstream setting. Again, part of a statutory national return, and we've seen the data released, and we're showing consistent levels between September 23 and September 24. The second measure is around the number of qualifications delivered in adult learning. Quarter 2 is the first time we report this in this year, and again it's exceeded its target. Excuse me, it's slightly higher than the same time last year. I would say we have refined those targets substantially from last year to this year, so still shows really positive that we've exceeded those targets that we've set. In terms of there are 12 KPIs that are achieving their ambition. I won't go through those, they are all in the report. In terms of the 4 measures that are not achieving their target, 3 of these were reported in quarter 1. Again, you'll be very familiar with a recycling rate and recycling at county council-owned household waste recycling centres, so I won't dwell on those. The third measure is around section 19 flood investigations completed within 6 months. While this is still showing as not achieving its target, there has been a significant improvement between quarter 1 and quarter 2, and hope to see that improvement continue into quarter 3. The new measure where we're not achieving our target, this is the first time it's been reported in quarter 2 as underachieving, is the rate of children in care. We have gone from a rate, up to, we've gone from 53.6 in quarter 1 to 54.9, so a small increase, but it does take us outside of our tolerance range for this measure. What I would say is we've had the national statistical release on children in care in the last 2 weeks. We are still considerably below both statistical neighbours and national comparisons for this measure. Again, as you'll be aware from previous discussions, the children in care cohort is thoroughly audited. We are confident that the children that are coming into care are the right children, that is appropriate. The last 6 months has seen a slowing down of exiting of care, so it's not necessarily we're seeing more, well, we aren't seeing more children coming in, we're just not exiting them as quickly as we maybe previously had. And again, through the audits that we do and the reviews of the plan for permanence, which is done on a weekly basis, we know that some of that is down to some of the plans for permanence taking a little bit longer to get the right outcome for that child or young person. We're confident in those permanence plans and are confident that we are offering the right opportunities in terms of a long-term future for that child or young person. It's also important to note that unaccompanied asylum-seeking children don't exit care as such, and those decisions aren't made by us in terms of who comes into care. So again, we obviously have an element of the cohort that are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. So that's the children in care measure. In terms of contextual measures, so those are the measures where the Executive Director has kind of recommended that we bring measures up into this report for your consideration and your awareness. We've brought through a number this time, partly because these have been the first time they've been reported this year. So the Lincolnshire County Council's CO2 emissions and the Lincolnshire CO2 emissions have been brought through, obviously as an element to support the delivery of the Green Master Plan. Again, we are seeing some of the challenges around that, with obviously particularly the Lincolnshire County Council, as obviously more people are coming back into the workplace after COVID. So we are seeing that coming back to kind of the pre-COVID levels. Also wanted to bring to your attention, again, I've mentioned this before, but the really positive KPIs around our visitors to heritage attractions and our overall numbers of visitors and the impact on the economy. A really positive picture. I know you'll be aware there was an action-packed summer, so that Q2 period was incredibly busy and has yielded some really, really positive results in terms of visitor figures to Lincolnshire. And we expect to see that continue in Q3 with lots of planned events. Again, I've previously mentioned the occupancy rate around our economic development portfolio. Again, this continues to increase and is now at 93%. So getting to because we always have an element of availability within that occupancy to give flexibility. So that's not far off its kind of maximum occupancy. And then I also wanted to bring to your attention that we are reporting for the first time, this is a new measure into this year's report, again, a nationally published measure around council tax in the lowest quartile for county authorities. We are ranked third out of 21 local authorities. We also obviously can support this with showing that we obviously secure best value for our resources by recent work that have been done by our external auditors. And we haven't reported any significant weaknesses, and we've been identified and held up for our arrangements around secure and economy and efficiency and effectiveness. So alongside obviously being in that third out of 21, we can show through our audit work that that's not having any, we're still having a really positive picture around services. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that, again, you'll recall that two of our contextual measures in the past has been around Ofsted outcomes in schools, and I'm sure everybody is aware that the single judgment rating has been paused, and there obviously we are awaiting a new framework to be implemented in the 25-26 academic year. So just to make you aware that we won't be reporting in the overall report any measures around Ofsted outcomes because we're not able to do so. And obviously once we know that new system, we'll bring back in terms of what measures we may want to include. So overall, a really positive picture, and I'll now hand over for any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Caroline. I'm always interested in the, on page 35, the number of carers that we've supported. And I just think this target is a bit of a funny one, really, and I wonder how meaningful it is when it's the number of carers supported per 100,000 of the adult population. So to me, that doesn't really tell me how many carers we've supported out of the total number of carers that there are in the county. Do you see what I mean? So I'm just wondering how meaningful it is really to have that figure, because does that mean that well, it doesn't really mean anything, I don't think. So that's just me looking at it. And I wonder whether there would be a better way of doing that so we can see how many of our carers we are actually supporting. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's always a difficult one, because what we want to be able to do is show how we compare to other authorities, and obviously this measure is something that is published nationally, so it gives us an opportunity to make that overall comparison in terms of where do we sit. As we know, there are more detailed measures go into adult scrutiny in terms of the support given to carers, and in particularly, reviewing carers' needs, for example, which we have really positive performance on. But yeah, it's having something that we can benchmark against, but I appreciate the comments. But what I can also do is, in the narrative for the next times for Q3, we can make sure we're putting in there the detail of exactly how many carers that actually is in terms of Lincolnshire's figures, so your numerator and your denominator, so it's a little bit clearer. So I'll take that back.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Yep, Councillor Dills.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all, and thanks for the report, Caroline. I thoroughly support what Councillor Key says about the numbers on carers. I was, having done the work or working on the young carers in the scrutiny that we're looking at, panel A, I was a bit disappointed there's no mention of them in the, in the objectives, but we'll be coming with the recommendations next week or so. I just wanted to ask, and it is on A6, page 51, on the ambitions supporting high aspirations on SEND. Obviously, it's a big issue now nationally, special education needs and disabilities, and the provision for them. And I welcome what's in the report and what's going on with these 32 schools, on the SEND project. I just wanted to ask though, and I've got two daughters who do teach, one of which tried for the SEND qualification, but with young children she actually found it too much and she withdrew. But how many of our schools actually have a SEND qualified SEND teacher, or more importantly, how many don't? Do we know? I've got one other question if I may after.
Thank you. So currently we wouldn't be able to answer that question. Clearly I can talk to Martin Smith and get him to provide you an update, but obviously it's delegated for the schools to identify a SENCO. So every school must have a SENCO and must also have a governor who is also lead on special educational needs and children with disability. But in terms of what level of training, we wouldn't have oversight on that.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And my other question was just on the same page, but a bit lower down on the education system working with behaviour support in schools across our secondary schools. Do we get into all schools for that, or is that non-academies? Or do you know what I'm saying? Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah, thank you. So as part of the higher needs budget, which obviously funds a whole raft of things, including placements for children with special educational needs. We do also fund a generic service that goes in to support all schools. And all schools, whether or not they're academies or not, are able to access that, those services, because they're provided by our special schools into all the other schools, but funded centrally. So it is available for them to all access.
Thank you for that as well. Obviously I've got an interest in my own local school, and I know we've got all sorts of problems there. I'd be interested offline to see if the Deeping School is involved in that programme. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to follow that up.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Okay, I've got a few in that instance. I'll go back to the point that Councillor Dilks raised actually about, and I wasn't going to, but you've raised a very good point around, shall I say, the level of training that teachers have on SEND needs. Obviously, in SEND schools, they will have a much higher level of training, which is, I think, a lot of the concerns parents have, which is why they push for EHCPs, why they try and go down the route they go down, because in my own personal experience, dealing with it in a professional and personal capacity, the level of training and how it's dealt with it varies hugely. Some schools are fantastic dealing with it, and some are not in this county, because most of my formative years in primary school was down south. But one school was brilliant, and I had one that was absolutely awful. So it varies hugely, and I think that's the issue. Is we, as Debbie said, the Chief Executive said, we don't know. And I don't know if we can take, or if you like, a stock take, because I appreciate the days of us being the old education authority are long gone. But if it's something we can do, I think that would be helpful, and it would also help on the SEND projects around trying to get more special educational needs children who aren't as severe into mainstream school. And I think that is one way we as an authority, if we can get the information, could reassure parents and say, actually, these teachers in XYZ school have X training, they've done this, and that's one way of reassuring them. I'll just make my 2 points, Councillor, and then I'll bring you in. The costs of the new food waste service, do we know what that will be to the County Council in its first year and then ongoing? I've actually had this raised with me by a parish councillor who's quite interested in knowing if the information is available, what the first year's costs will be, and then what the annualised costs will be, and if there will be a cost pressure to the County Council. Thirdly, and Councillor Kendrick will know, I raise this regularly when it comes before Children's. Our main pressure from reading the report, both here and at Children's, seems to be, in terms of children in care, seems to be from unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We do have a minor pressure from our own sort of, population, but the largest pressure seems to be from that cohort, with various initiatives and fast-tracking of applications, etc. Is there a risk that pressure could increase because there seems to be ever larger numbers coming across the channel with even more complex needs, and we seem to be left holding the proverbial baby? And I don't know what the solution is to that. It's probably above us and up the chain. But are we ready to, as much as we can, mitigate that? I know it's in legislation 0.1% of population presently, and when that hits, the tap turns off, but that could move, and goalposts could be moved. So are we preparing for the potential of the goalposts to move, and what are the financial implications for us if it does? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll hand over to Andrew for the waste cost. In relation to the special educational needs, currently, again, it will be going to Children's Scrutiny, or I think it may have gone to Children's Scrutiny, around the sort of second phase of the building communities of specialist provision. So we're looking at establishing a network of special educational units within mainstream. Now, as part of that, that's working with the schools that want to come forward, as opposed to us identifying the schools. We have been able to go out and get offers from the schools across a really good geographical spread across the county, which is really fortunate. And so the intention of phase 2 is that we establish special educational needs provision within mainstream schools as a bit of an additional option, rather than the options that we've got at the moment in terms of mainstream or special school. And clearly within those units, the staff will be staffed up to be able to support children with special educational needs that are struggling in mainstream, but also then we'll be able to provide a bit of an outreach into those schools as part of their geographical network. So that's part of that project. In relation to the unaccompanied asylum seekers, there's two routes that actually young people come into care. We're part of the national transfer scheme, so we get a percentage of those young people that come through the national system tend to come into Kent and then are dispersed across the whole of the country in equal measures. And then we also have the numbers that clearly turn up in Lincolnshire, that don't go through a national system but are found first off in Lincolnshire. The government has capped the amount in terms of what every local authority is expected to do their fair shares in terms of accepting people who are unaccompanied asylum seekers. Clearly, though, that cap, that number, continues to increase. As the general number increases, obviously the government increased that number. Our services at the moment are provided by Bernardo's. They have a number of premises across the county and outside of the county to be able to provide accommodation, and we do continually work with Bernardo's to review whether or not that's sufficient and scenario plan for the future. So we have a good relationship with them, and clearly they provide the accommodation as part of our contract. For the waste issue.
Well, yeah, I've actually got a very friendly head of waste online who's happy to answer the question for you as well. But I'll just say more broadly, clearly we're still working through finalising the potential budget proposals for next year, and obviously we'll be coming to this meeting of OSMB in January to talk through those in more detail. So there'll be plenty more in the waste space around then as well, because there are a lot of other changes around things like extended producer responsibility and what have you as well, which we need to work through. So I'll hand over to Chris if that's okay, please, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, good morning, everybody. Yeah, so for food waste, there's going to be a saving to the county council in our disposal costs, because energy from waste is actually is a higher cost, and the actual the gate fee for taking food waste, we are now we've secured a contract and capacity. We actually get a small rebate, so we're estimating we're in the region of a £2.5 million saving per annum by introducing the food waste scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just very briefly come back, if I may, Debbie, on the point you made around unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. So the risk basically is, that, as I've said, the goalposts move constantly. If that keeps happening, now I appreciate at the minute that is paid for by central government. If that changes, and I'm not saying it will, I don't know. Are we able to mitigate that risk? And even if it is being paid by central government, if we don't have the places, and then we have pressure from our own population, if you will, what risks are we exposed to? Will we need additional resource, additional places? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the care costs, as you said, Councillor Smith, are picked up by the government, and the government fund us through a grant to be able to provide the full cost of care. That does currently meet the cost, and so that grant is currently sufficient, so local resources aren't needed to be able to support that cohort of children. Clearly, if the grant was reduced or cut, then there clearly would be a financial burden on the local authority, because in law, if they are under 18, then clearly they need to come into our care, and it's part of our statutory duties. So absolutely that cost burden then would fall to local taxation.
Thank you. Currently, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to add a little bit of context in terms of the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Actually, compared to 12 months ago, we actually have less unaccompanied asylum-seeking children now than we had 12 months ago. So it is our kind of non-US population that has increased over the last 6 months, just for clarification.
Councillor Lee.
Thanks. I was just going to come back on one thing, but I'm going to come back on two. I personally can't think of anything more sad than traumatised children coming from other countries as a result of war, children who need looking after. And I tell you what, if that means that my council tax goes towards paying for that, then I'm more than happy with that happening. I was actually going to come back. I wasn't even going to speak on the special educational needs provision, but I knew about what Debbie spoke about, and I think it's great. But I too would back the request for some of those numbers, because I think we need to see where we've come from to know that where we've gone to is sufficient progress. I've got a grandson, as well as representing people locally. I've got a grandson with special educational needs who was in mainstream schooling until he got to 11 or 12 and then had to go into different kind of provision. So I'm very interested in this, but thank you. I just wanted to make those two comments.
No, I have a personal, as I said, personal experience on this, and I went from very good, where there was a unit back in the early 90s, so I'm showing my age now, to provision that was, frankly, totally inappropriate and had huge impacts. So if it's done properly, it can be appropriate, but we as much as we can, as I've already said, I appreciate we're not the Old School Education Authority, but through the Regional Schools Commissioner and through Children's Scrutiny, and I'm sure the Chairman and members will do, need to make sure that proper scrutiny is applied and that the provision is appropriate, so that we don't have children that fall through the cracks, because the implication is very harmful and can be lifelong, and the implications both for them on a personal level and also financially for the state, for want of a better word, is monumental, rather than if we get it right, they can go on to do a heck of a lot of good for themselves and also the wider community. And you want to come back, Councillor?
Yeah, I'd absolutely echo that. I mean, Joe's provision was great. It wasn't in this county, it was in Notts, but yeah. But again, my heart goes out just as much to kids coming from abroad, traumatised by war, as it does for children who need decent education. We have to look after children per se. We're the grown-ups. Thank you.
Do members have any other comments? Seeing none, so I will move to the recommendations, that we consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendations, which we have done, and agree comments to be passed on, so which they will do. So I will move from the Chair that the Board supports the recommendations to the Executive as detailed in page 16 of the report, and ask our comments are captured, which they will be, by the Scrutiny Officer. Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Thank you, Councillor Sear. All those in favour? Thank you. And that is unanimous, but I will ask, any against and any abstentions? Seeing none, that's clearly carried. On to item 8, which is People Management Update Quarter 2, 24-25. The Scrutiny Report can be found between pages 73 to 80 of the agenda pack. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on HR management information. Our action is to seek assurance on the management of this information. This report will be presented by Tony Kavanagh, Assistant Director of HR and Operational Support. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, you've all got the papers in front of you there. So what I'm going to do is just give some edited highlights in terms of the metrics, and just briefly cover off the gender pay gap. So in terms of overall employments, that's relatively static now. In terms of that, we have seen some growth, and that's been in the right areas, which has been adult care, children's services, and LFR. On another sort of positive note, we've also seen the continuation of a low turnover rate. You will probably be aware, 12 to 18 months ago, we were somewhere in the region of 10 to 11%, and that has seen a steady decline, in part to some of the attraction and retention initiatives that we've put in place. That said, obviously, we still know there are challenges within some areas of the council, adult care, children's, and some parts of the Resources Directorate. In terms of our agency spend, less positive news here in terms of that, in that we have seen an increase in spend within agency. That is within adult care and within resources as well. That reflects why, for example, in resources we've got high turnover within parts of resources like commercial, legal, and transformation systems and performance, so that would correlate with that. In terms of sickness absence, again, ever so slight rise. We're now currently in quarter 2, we stood at 7.5 days per FTE, which is the County Council's target. I think there's the possibility that will rise due to the position that we're in with as we enter into winter and the viruses that unfortunately all seem to go around. But generally, performance on sickness has been very good over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. In terms of equality, diversity and inclusion, so you will see there is an update on the gender pay gap. We don't actually have to publish our information on the gender pay gap until March next year, because it's always a year in arrears, but we all, as a council, we're always fairly proactive in terms of once we've got that information, we will publish it. So you'll see there that the statistics are, we have a 31% male in the workforce and 69% female, so largely that is unchanged from the previous year and is no surprise. In terms of the measures, so gender pay gap saw a marginal increase from what it was last year, so 0.1%, but statistically probably not relevant really, so pretty much around the same. Whereas median gender pay gap, we saw a reduction and an improvement of 0.8%. And if you note that the national median gender pay gap was around 14.9%, so you'll see that the county council is in a good position when you compare nationally. So I will stop there, Chairman, and take any questions.
Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm always wondering about comparisons and how do we, for example, on sickness days lost, compare with similar authorities with the same sort of geography and numbers of staff?
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. I mean, essentially we are, from the latest round of benchmarking that we've done, we are in a good position as a county council compared to our peers, similar sized authorities. Consistently, we have been below the average that you would expect from a county council.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question on the turnover. What is the corporate division doing that the other divisions aren't? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the reason the corporate division is high is because it's a small division. So a small number of people leaving within that will see a higher rate. It's simply as that, because I think it's in the region of 30 odd, 40 odd people, and so a smaller number leaving will just sort of not give a proportionate real picture of turnover in there. So I don't think Debbie has got any concerns from a corporate perspective. Yeah, it's just that sort of small area, hence why.
Thank you. I wasn't trying to be facetious, but it just stood out as an obvious question to ask. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Members have any further questions? In that case, I've got one. I note that on contract agency spend, there has been an increase since I've been a county councillor. This is the first time I can recall seeing on-contract spend increase rather than off-contract agency spend increase. Are officers confident that we have a handle on agency spend increase, and are discussions regularly held on either bringing certain spends on contracting agency or recruiting in-house to reduce agency spend? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I think we're in and have been for a while, a very challenging workforce situation, which the county council in the main has done very well in terms of managing that and trying to retain and also attract the right people to work within the authority. That said, as you know, there are lots of specialist roles and roles out there that are demand outstretches supply. So I think the discussions around agency are regular discussions that directorate leadership teams will have, and in terms of trying to get value for money and trying to, like you said, get on contract rather than off contract. I think sometimes, regrettably, we have to fill a vacancy that's critical for continuing care or whatever. So I think the key thing is that it is on the radar in terms of spend. I think we've currently got an audit on the contract that we've got, an audit going through on the Matrix contract, just to, I guess, assess that VFM, that value for money option. So, yes, you're quite right, Mr. Chairman, that it has gone up, but I think in terms of the organisation's oversight and management of that, I think it's robust, and I think if you drill down into some of this, you will see that, particularly in the resources area, that where there is high turnover of what is a very specialist area, legal. Again, there is a need for specialist lawyers in that area, and so regrettably that often means then that we're having to go outside and seek that. But there is the oversight and there is the intention to reduce at all times. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask one final time. Do members have any questions? Seeing none, I will go to the proposal, and I'll move it from the chair, that the report be received and that the board is satisfied and assured with the assurances offered with respect to HR management. Can I please have a seconder? Councillor Key, thank you. All those in favour, please shout. Thank you. That's unanimous, but I will ask any against and any abstentions. Seeing none, thank you very much. So we will move to item 9, which is the Health and Safety Annual Report 23-24. The scrutiny report can be found on pages 81 to 98 of the agenda pack. This report provides an overview of the key achievements, activities and statistics across Lincolnshire County Council directorates regarding compliance with health and safety legislation and statutory duties. The Overview and Scrutiny Management Board is invited to review and provide comments on the Health and Safety Annual Report. Our actions are, as it's been said, to consider the report. I will pass again over to Tony Kavanagh, Assistant Director of HR and Organisational to introduce the report. Tony, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apology first. Obviously, my head of health and safety would normally have presented this report to members, but fortunately for him, he's on annual leave. So he is the specialist in this area. So you'll please bear with me if I'm unable to answer any questions that you do have, but I will ensure you get a response. So in terms of what you have in front of you, it's the annual report for the period April 23 to March 24. What I will do is literally just give some sort of edited highlights, if that's okay. I think the things to draw out from the report are, first and foremost, everyone will know we have the Health and Safety Executive as the oversight for all health and safety matters within England and Wales. In terms of the key thing, clearly there's been no intervention or enforcement action from the HSE on any issue within the County Council, which is obviously a very good positive. Other things to sort of pick out are in terms of our support to our maintained schools. We had 100% response rate to the health and safety self-assessment work that they've done, and that's a lot of that is down to the good work that the health and safety team are doing with schools and supporting them, and so that they understand the importance of ensuring that happens. Another area to note is our responsibility with respect to DSE in terms of people's outdated term now, but display screen equipment. We've introduced a new scheme which is more cost effective for the authority, but provides the legal safeguards for individuals who regularly, which is probably 99% of staff nowadays, who regularly use a computer and screen equipment. So it's got a greater scope in terms of those that can access it, well, as we've got the voucher scheme, but also the positive is that because of using that scheme, it's much more cost effective, which is a positive. So a bit of a win-win in that sort. And then another area just to note is the development with property services in moving to a digital checklist, again to avoid to sort of, so we can see some of the challenges within some of the areas and any similarities, but also to reduce, again, bureaucracy, I guess. What we don't want is a repetition of health and safety audit or then a property audit and so on and so forth, because it's frustrating for individuals. For example, if it was in a residential children's home or in a family centre and so on. So I guess one other thing just to sort of highlight is, and this has been brought out previously in my people management update, which but it as it still fits within the health and safety sort of overall portfolio, there has been a significant amount of development for our workforce with respect to health and well-being in the last 12 months and ongoing into this month, which obviously I won't go on too much about, seeing as this is an annual report, but there's been lots of development in that area and growth in that area, which is a real positive. And I think in terms of the actual data, which is at the end of the report, you'll see that accidents, near misses are there and thereabouts, very similar to what they were in the previous year. Incidents are up slightly. I think that is more about better reporting than necessarily that there's been a spike in incidents in any way. We have a system called EvoSafe, which you can see within the report, which is a sort of a challenging system to operate for managers that don't utilise it on a day-to-day basis. We are reviewing that, and there will be a new internal system coming in to manage those sorts of incidents. But there has been a push on incident reporting, because it's really important we get to understand where there have been inappropriate situations or incidents with either members of the public, with our service users and so on. So overall, I think it's a positive report, and I will pause there. Thank you.
Councillor Kendrick.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, looking at the non-employee accident stats there, are there any particular areas in relation to the public who've had accidents? Are there any particular areas where this takes place? Is there any concern of any areas? Is there any theme that runs through this, or is it across the board? We've just got a sort of general figure there. I was just wondering if it can be broken down into areas.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kendrick. I don't know is the honest answer. I'll have to go and understand, of the 311 accidents, what those involved, and report back.
Thanks very much. Thanks a lot.
Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question's about the vouchers, the eyesight and display screen equipment. I'm not asking this for myself because I won't be here after May, but I do wonder whether this has been opened out to councillors as well as staff, because we often don't seem to get these things, and we're being encouraged now not to print anything off. So we're using our display screen equipment just as much as anybody else is, in fact probably more than some. And I just wonder whether that should be thought about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point, and absolutely there is no reason why we couldn't extend the scheme to councillor colleagues in terms of access for that. So that's something I can take away.
Thank you. Do members have any further questions? Seeing none. Well, I've got one, and you may be able to answer, Tony, you may not, so I apologise if you can't at the moment.
No.
Could you give us a flavour what the instance, what caused the instance that resulted in a hospital admission or 7 days off work? Because obviously to have a hospital admission or that sort of time away is, they're not, shall I say, insignificant instances, they're quite serious. So is there a repeating theme, or is it, as you said in your report, is it more a case of actually it's similar as was. It's just that they're reported better and we capture the data better, so we're more aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I think probably in terms of the specific incidents itself, I'm not aware. I think, but what I can do is I can come back on a sort of overview. I'm conscious that there are a large number, so I just want to be mindful of confidentiality, but I can share the general theme with you if that's okay.
Just really to,
Exactly.
thank you. So just really to add to what Tony was saying is that clearly we deliver a real breadth of services, and some areas clearly people are more likely, if you like, to suffer work-related health challenges. So whilst I haven't got a drill down of the information, you know, fire and rescue services clearly is an area where people are more likely to get harmed than perhaps an office space. Adults working with children in terms of special educational needs, particularly in our residential area, are more likely to get harmed than, again, an office worker. So I think it would be in those areas where we would expect to see a higher percentage of reporting.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll ask one final time. Members have any questions? Seeing none, so I will go to the proposal and I will move it from the chair that the report be endorsed and the board supports the publication of the Health and Safety Annual Report 2023-2024 on the LCC website. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sear, thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous, but I will ask any against or any abstentions. Seeing none, that's carried. Moving on to item 10, the recommissioning of document storage. This is a pre-decision scrutiny report and it can be found between pages 99 to 108 of the agenda pack. The Council's current contract with Restore PLC expires on the 31st of March 2025 with no further options to extend. This report sets out the proposed course of action in respect of recommissioning of the Council's document storage contract post-April 2025, and our actions are as follows: to consider the report and to determine whether we support the recommendations to the Leader of the Council, Executive Councillor for Resources, Communications and Commissioning as set out in pages 101, and agree any comments that should be passed on to him in relation to this item. The report will be presented by David Ingham, Head of Information Assurance. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. As you see, the purpose of the report is to set out the proposed course of action for the recommissioning of the Council's off-site storage document contract. This will be via a compliant framework direct award process for a period of 5 years plus 2, with an estimated whole life value of £1.68 million. The Council's current contract with Restore expires 31st of March 2025, and it is our intention to recommission the service on a like-for-like basis. It's the case that we require physical off-site storage to store circa 500,000 hard copy records until such time they are no longer required and can be destroyed. Destruction of records is often informed by retention periods, which are driven by legal and statutory obligations placed on the Council or by clear business need. As you would expect, some of these records need to be held for a very long time. For example, safeguarding records have to be held for 75 years, and because of the diversity of the services we provide, we have a number of different retention periods to apply. Now, 500,000 records is a big number, so I think it's worth mentioning two key factors that will help reduce this number over time. So the first is that the Council is no longer producing the high number of hard copy records it once did, and that's because the majority of information is now held in digital form. Therefore, it's reducing the flow of information to off-site storage. And the second very important point is that there is an ongoing records management project which is looking at all records across the estate to ensure they are only held if absolutely necessary, and destroying those we no longer need. This includes those held in off-site storage. It's a mammoth task, but to date we've reviewed over 300,000 of those records and we've destroyed over 80,000. This work will continue through 2025. As a result, we expect holdings to start to reduce naturally from the end of 2025. I think it's worth highlighting these important points to demonstrate the ongoing work to reduce overall costs of off-site storage. Thank you, Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you. I was interested about this records management project, because we all hate going through stuff and chucking stuff away. I'm a bit of a hoarder, I'm afraid, with records, and I know I keep things longer than I should. But with regards to, you said people, you're going through 300,000 records, I think. Who's actually doing that, and how are they deciding what's going to be thrown away? How many people are involved? It must be an absolutely ginormous task. And is everything stored with expiry dates on, if you know what I mean, when it can be thrown away? I'm just wondering how that actually is working. Thank you.
Yes, it is a huge task. So approximately 3 years ago, following a review, CLT supported work to undertake a review of all records held across every service area. And it's fair to say that some of our legacy records were not in a great state, so it was important work. There is a team of 8 business support staff led by my records manager, Paula, on the left here. And they, over the past 3 years, have been reviewing all manner of areas, buildings, locations to review those records. The end game is to make sure that all records have been appraised, indexed with the definite retention period on it. So we move away from hoarding information, because you're quite right, people do not like throwing stuff away, to a point where we get definite dates where information can be destroyed. And as I say, that project's going to continue for at least another year.
Thank you. I did work somewhere once and they had a big porter cabin and they got so much in it the fourth floor fell out of the porter cabin. So I understand what a mammoth task this is, and Paula, you've got your work cut out, so thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Kendrick.
Thanks, Chairman. I was just wondering about the digitisation in terms of retrieval of documents, because technology changes all the time, and something that's stored in one digital form now, how will it be retrieved, say, in 10, 20 years' time? I mean, I'm not advocating we go back to paper, but obviously that's not the thing, but at least a piece of paper doesn't change over 10, 20, 30, 40 or 70 years, as you say. You might have to retrieve, store some documents for, which we're all well aware of. I was just wondering what contingencies are there to allow for the changes in, or do they have to retain kit technology, shall we say, from the current period for the next 70 years, so that something could be retrieved in 10, 20 years' time? I'm unclear as how that would work.
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually. Digital continuity is really important. And often it's not thought about as part of a project bringing in new systems. So when we engage with the service area that's procuring the system, that's one of the questions we pose. Have we thought about how long these records are going to be held? Have we thought about the technology that's needed to continue to access those sorts of records? And we've had a case recently where we had that issue, where we had to go and find old technology in order to open old records. So it's absolutely something that we consider as part of our engagement with service areas. It's a challenging issue, as you see, many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of digital records in all sorts of different formats. But absolutely, it's the top of our list for asking the service areas.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'll just expand on that, if I may. So how do you mitigate that, Dave? Because obviously what you don't want is 20 million different types of computer. So you've got a Windows 7, a Windows 8, or Windows 9. To access old records, it's a bit like, as Councillor Kendrick said, I can remember floppy disks being the bee's knees. Then it was CDs. Then it was USBs. Now you can't often find a laptop with a CD disk drive, and a lot of records will have be on disk drive and things. So how are we mitigating that to ensure that we can have a machine or a system of technology in place that's, shall I say, multifunctional across various methods of storage, so you've not got 20 million different types of PC to access documents that you need to hold and access and ensure is kept safe and secure. Thank you.
I might have to bring my records manager in to answer a bit of that question. But essentially, I think we're fairly fortunate because most of the records we hold are in fairly common file types. So, for example, anything we create within Microsoft 365 has a common file type behind it. And I think it's less often where we are coming across more unique technology in order to open these sorts of files. But it is something that we have to keep our eye on. As all the new technology passes and new software, new technology come in, we are seeing more common file types being used rather than the unique stuff we have seen previously. It's important, however, that we plan for that. So if we are using unique applications to open unique documents, we need to make sure we engage with that service area to plan for any reprocurement or change in application. So as I say, it's a common issue, it's a common question, and it's one that we engage with service areas on.
Thank you very much. I'll ask one final time, do members have any questions? I'm seeing none, so I will go to the recommendation. I move that the board supports the recommendations to the Leader of the Council as detailed on page 101 of the report, and ask that our comments, which we have made, be captured by the Scrutiny Officer and passed on to the Leader for his consideration between the 13th and 20th of December, and I will move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous, but I will ask any against or any abstentions. Seeing none. On to item 11, which is Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 24-25 Quarter 2. This is a pre-decision scrutiny report and can be found between pages 109 to 142 of the agenda pack. We are invited to review the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report ahead of its presentation to the Executive on the 3rd of December. This report compares projected expenditure with the 24-25 budget and explains the significant variances. Our actions are to consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendations to the Executive which are contained on page 112 and agree that our comments be passed to the Executive in relation to this item. The report will be presented by Michelle Grady, Assistant Director for Finance. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you very much. So when we were reported back to the committee the quarter one position, we were expected to overspend our service budgets at that point by 4.7 million. So a lot of work's been done over the last few months to review that. And whilst we are still projecting an overspend, it is an improving position, and we know there is still more work that we need to be doing looking at the forecasts of income. So we're currently forecasting an overspend of £4 million. The pressures reported at the end of last year and going into quarter one continue to feature in the report, such as pressures around school transport. These pressures continue, but that's reduced from quarter one due to mitigations that have been put into place, particularly around route optimisation, and other continuing significant pressures are around the waste services and social care placements. The appendices that start on the table on page 124 give more detail of the variance and provide updates as well on the use of reserves and development fund initiatives. It's worth noting that we have a contingency in our revenue budget of 7.4 million, so it's not expected that we will need to do any unplanned drawdown of the reserves for our revenue spend, and that contingency can cover the pressures that we're highlighting in the report. The report also contains an update relating to the announcements of the Chancellor's autumn statement made on the 30th of October, which we'll need to consider as part of the budget setting process and the papers that will come back into scrutiny in January. Also worth noting, and obviously been discussed quite a lot this morning, we're forecasting an overspend on our high needs block in the DSG of 3.6 million around the high needs spend on relating to the schools grant, and that's planned to be covered by reserves at this point. So I haven't got any other items that I wanted to highlight, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Key.
Yes, could I just ask you about the increase in employers' national insurance? Obviously, I think that's probably from April, isn't it? So for the next year, but are we any clearer on how that's going to be met? Because our bill must be enormous. Thank you.
So there's two elements to that. So there's the element of the cost relating to our own staff and the staff that we employ, and the expectation is, or the government has announced that they will cover those costs. I think what is probably more significant is the impact that it will have on contracted provision, particularly around social care contracts. So we're still waiting. We're expecting, we're all sat here with bated breath. We're expecting a policy briefing today. So we're all sat here waiting for that. Obviously, we'll get our settlement during December, but we're still unclear about how that will be funded. But it is a significant pressure for the council.
Councillor Lee.
I'm just looking at the bottom at page 115.1.18. Proposed council budget will be presented to exec on the 7th of January, reflecting the budget. I think I have contacted you about part of this on something else, but will as members, will we be able to find out any more detail prior to that, or have we really got to wait till January to find out how the budget in October is going to benefit us?
So, as I've just mentioned, we're waiting for a policy briefing. So, the government announced a particular interest to us, an extra 1.3 billion, of which quite a significant of that was around social care, announced some additional money through highways funding. What we don't know, what we can assess is what we usually get as part of those announcements. However, the government's been quite clear that they're trying to look at how they distribute that money to make sure areas of deprivation are benefited. That might not benefit LCC as a rural county, so we're waiting for the policy briefing to understand the methods that the government are planning to use to distribute that funding. We don't actually get our final settlement. I think it's the 19th of December. They always throw a few curveballs in for us at that point, so we really don't know what we're dealing with. And also in January, we're waiting for quite a lot of information back from the districts around council tax collection and the council tax base, which has a massive impact on our budget as well. So that January is usually we're usually cutting it fine over Christmas, trying to get the reports out and get a final position. And to be honest, usually in January exec we are having to table some stuff that we get quite late on in the day. So we're not going to have defined figures. We'll probably have a bit more information after this policy briefing, which I'm quite happy to share.
Is that a policy briefing for officers, or can we have some detail about that as well?
I'll let. Do you want to come in, Andrew, on that?
Andrew.
Yeah, it's just to provide a bit more context for what Michelle's been explaining. So I'm actually covering the group leaders meeting on Tuesday for Debbie. So I'll endeavour to provide what I can as a verbal update at that meeting. It's a national policy statement, essentially, is what we're expecting, and what the government has tended to do in the most recent 2 or 3 years that have gone past, given the creeping lateness for, we're almost turkey sandwiches, having trying to work through the numbers. They've endeavoured to try and provide a direction of travel in this policy statement. So, for example, funding pot X might be divided up by needs formula Y type thing. So we can get a good idea, but it isn't the final type of figures. But yeah, see what we can do next week.
Councillor Dill.
Yeah, thanks for that. Hope you enjoy your turkey sandwiches. Sounds like you're going to be busy as usual over Christmas. I just wanted to sort of turn to the overall position. We're used to end of year finances being in slight underspends and having money left over. How unusual is it to be in the position right now that we're expecting slight overspends? And I don't wish to overstate the position. I appreciate it's not a disaster, but it seems to be, we seem to be in a slightly different position to what we're usually in.
I think it's safe to say that our position is not the norm for county councils. I think quite a number of our county groups have been forecasting and have indeed had to draw down reserves for the last couple of years, and we've been in a unusual, unique position due to the way we've managed our finances and budgeted for and made difficult decisions in the past. I think is the reason we're in this position. The reassurance I can provide is, although we know that we've got these pressures on our service budgets, we do have a contingency that can cover those. So we're not expecting to be in a position at the end of the year where we're needing to draw down reserves to cover the costs of those. We think they can be met from the contingencies that we're holding in the revenue budget. So hopefully at the year-end position, it might not have loads of money to reallocate at that point, but hopefully we'll be in a position that we're comfortable with.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And then secondary to that is that the schools budget, is expected to be overspent, which it says in the report would require additional use of reserves if things don't change. I just wonder if you have I appreciate schools is separate almost, but it's a bit of a concern as, again, normally we have quite a substantial overspend that goes back into schools, doesn't it?
I think you need to separate out the individual schools' budgets and the challenge that the high needs block is presenting, which I think Debbie can give a bit more of an update on.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the bit that's under pressure in terms of the school's budget is the higher needs block, which basically funds all of the additional special educational needs, so the education, health and care plan costs in terms of placements into special schools and also placements into private special schools or the independent sector. And that's, as we've heard earlier, is a national challenge. And again, we are one of the very few local authorities that haven't, up until this year, demonstrated an overspend in their higher needs block. Most of our colleagues across the country have clearly suffered in terms of those increase in demand in terms of education, health and care plan. There's two things that are happening currently to mitigate some of those challenges. The first one is that in the autumn statement there was an announcement of some additional monies. Obviously we wait for the policy review to exactly find out exactly how much will therefore be going into the higher needs block in terms of additional funding. And then also we are able to ask the schools, and with the consent of the schools we can actually seek to claim a bit of a small amount of funding. I can't remember exactly what the percentage is, but a percentage of the funding from the schools block to go transfer into the higher needs block. And that was unanimously supported at the schools forum last week, the week before. And so both of those factors we think therefore will offset the current position in terms of the overspend that we're forecasting. But obviously, as we were just saying, await the detail of exactly what that looks like on the policy review that we should get later today.
Councillor Key.
Yeah, if I could just come back, I just think one of the things that most of us will be watching for in any settlement is the fact that because we've been so careful with our money and we've made difficult decisions, not always popular, and we've kept within our budgets, unlike some other authorities which have got in a complete shambles, we don't want to be penalised because we've been careful and been prudent. And I think it would be very disappointing if there's any sign of that whatsoever. Thank you.
Before I ask my questions, do members have any other questions? Seeing none. No, I'd certainly endorse that point, Councillor Key, and I fear, I have no evidence of it, but I fear, based on past experience, that we may be in the position where, because we've been prudent and we've done the right thing, we may very well be in a position where, for want of a better word, we're shortchanged, especially with how the current government are looking around funding to be allocated, because, as Michelle's already alluded to, we don't, when deprivation is used as a primary index, we seem to be further unfairly shortchanged. In terms of the questions, you've already partially alluded to this, Debbie, but given the fact that there is a overspent of circa 3.6 million on the school's budget, principally of the high needs block, what can we do as an authority to ensure that we're not, and is it a case of we actually can't, and it's almost an inevitable situation that we will be in the similar position where we have to use the safety valve mechanism, or is it something we can stop? Secondly, given the recent inflation increases, are officers confident that the, again, designated schools grant DSG budgetary overspends will remain in with current figures, or is there a risk that these could rise even further? And there's not a mitigation process that would mitigate that. And finally, in respect to adults and community wellbeing, could officers explain what the war pensions element of the local reforms are and how this impacts the budget, which is on page 128? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in terms of trying to mitigate the demands around special educational needs, every local authority, I think it would be fair to say, are struggling with the increase in demand. And we are, again, just now beginning to see that financially, whereas other local authorities are clearly, further down the line in terms of that. I think the £100 million investment in terms of our special school has helped us to mitigate some of that. And clearly we're optimistic that the phase 2 of that programme, which is about the units into mainstream provision, will also help mitigate some of that. I think it would be fair to say that the government do recognise that they need to nationally reform the special educational needs and children with disability system. And that is something that clearly we're engaging through our sector in terms of the Directors of Children's Services Network, the Chief Execs Network, to actually address that. So we do think that there will be an element of national reform within that. Clearly, within, again, the autumn statement, there was an uplift for the schools budget. Exactly what that will mean financially, we await the policy statement, but certainly schools will be getting an uplift as part of that the autumn statement. In relation to the pensions, I'm going to maybe hand over to Michelle.
So I think we've discussed this before, that the contributions we collect from adult care, where clients of users are able to contribute towards their care, these are uplifted by DWP rates, and I'm presuming the war pension element of that is included in that, but I will check that back for you.
Thank you, Michelle. That'd be very helpful, because I know in other matters, war pensions are classed as a disregard. So that'd be very helpful to know, because I will, depending on your answer, I will take that away and potentially be writing to my MP on that. But I'll just come back, Debbie, on, if I may, very briefly, on schools in general and around transport, because you've said the government is looking to reform the SEND system, which, let's be honest, it has to be, because it's not, as many reports have said, it's not delivering the outcomes for the children that are in the SEND system by and large, and it's also not cost effective either for us as a county council, as we're seeing through this report. Are they also looking at SEND transport? Because if they're not, that's a bit putting the cart before the horse, because actually, if you don't solve one, you aren't going to solve long term. It will not solve the problem, because the transport is as big of a problem. In fact, for us, in some respects, it's probably worse, because we're the 4th biggest county in England. So are they also looking at that? And if not, I know there's been reports from the LGA and the CCN on this, which have been very good. I've read them. Is there any further pressure we can apply?
Yeah, thank you. And as you quite rightly said, despite significant demand for education, health and care plans, despite huge amounts of investment into the system to support children with special educational needs, outcomes haven't improved for children, and that's the primary reason why we need to look at reform. The current discussion, and clearly we and all of our sort of rural counties are challenging and clearly putting a case forward to lobby government to also look at the home to school transport issue. They're not particularly focusing on home to school transport, but all of the conversations are about what do we need to do to help schools be much more inclusive. So how can schools better meet the needs of children with special educational needs so that they don't need to access specialist provision? And so whilst not directly tackling the home to school transport issue, clearly if you create a system where schools are much more inclusive and have got the skills and the ability to be able to support children or more children with special educational needs within mainstream, then clearly children would stay at their local school, which would then have a positive impact on the home to school transport budget. But they're looking at it very much from the lens about how to make schools much more inclusive to be able to meet the needs of children with more complex issues.
I'll just again come back on that very briefly. Is there a statement or policy statement due on that? Because certainly as it currently stands, it's almost counterintuitive for mainstream schools to do that, because they don't get the funding, say, for teaching assistants for those children that need them and specialist training for staff. So in the reality, it is actually, for the school's point of view, budgetary wise, better for the EHCP process and that process to take place so that the children are in SEND schools, even though they may not need to be, but without the additional support they will fall through a crack. So is that taking place? Because obviously it's quite a conscious thing that without that framework around them, this drive to be inclusive is the right and proper thing to do, but it won't function properly and will fail if the safeguards and the processes aren't around in place so that the children have the support they need.
Yeah, completely agreed. Thank you very much. So that's in essence the conversations that we're beginning to have with the Department for Education. The system, in order to change, will clearly need some level of double running and some pump priming. We haven't got a date for a response in terms of the government. Fair to say that they are engaging with the sector and listening to the sector, but clearly it's at a very early stage.
Thank you. I'll ask one final time, members have any questions? Seeing none, so I will go to the recommendation. I move from the Chair that the Board supports the recommendation to the Executive as detailed on page 112 of the report, and that our comments have been captured by the Scrutiny Officer and will be shared with the Executive on 3rd of December. Can I have a seconder for those recommendations? Thank you, Councillor Sear. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous, but I will ask any against and any abstentions, and see none. Thank you. Turning to agenda item 12, Capital Budget Monitoring Report 24-25, Quarter 2. This scrutiny report can be found between pages 143 to 168 of the agenda pack. The report invites the Board to review the Capital Budget Monitoring Report ahead of its presentation to the Executive on the 3rd of December. This report compares projected expenditure with approved capital programmes, highlighting any forecasted variance. Our actions are to consider the report and to determine whether we support the recommendation to the Executive as set out on pages 145 and agree any comments to be passed on. This report is presented by Michelle Grady, Assistant Director for Finance. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you very much. So we currently have a capital programme of £193 million for the current year, and we are reporting a small variance of underspend on that budget. The variances that are detailed in Table 2 from page 154 are mainly due to variances in timing. During Quarter 1, we were reporting a potential risk of the funding for a number of schemes where we were waiting for confirmation of government funding ahead of the devolution deal. So we were waiting for an announcement around £20 million worth of funding, and Old Roman Bank scheme was continuing at risk within our programme, and that was forecasting as an overspend because we were continuing at risk. I'm pleased to announce that that funding's now been received, and so that risk has disappeared. So that scheme's no longer creating a pressure in the programme, and that's the main variance from Quarter 1. But no other items to raise as specific.
Thank you. Members have any questions? Seeing none, so I've got one very, very brief question. Are officers content the capital programme remains affordable and achievable given that inflation has risen and other costs that the council needs to bear?
We're still satisfied that it remains affordable. Clearly, we will review the overall programme and any pressures that we're seeing from schemes currently in the programme that will need to be met and included in the programme during budget setting, and review the impact on the revenue budget for funding that at that point.
Thank you. I'll ask one final time. Members have any questions? Seeing none, so I'll go to the recommendation. I move that the Board supports the recommendation to the Executive as detailed on page 145 of the report, and that our very brief comments on this will be captured by the designated Scrutiny Officer. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sear, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. That is unanimous, but I will ask any against, any abstentions. See none. On to item 13, Treasury Management Performance 24-25, Quarter 2 to the 30th of September 2024. The scrutiny report can be found between pages 169 to 202 of the agenda pack. The report outlines the Treasury management activities and performance for Quarter 2 of 24-25 as of the 30th of September 24, compared to the Treasury and annual investment strategies approved on March 11th, 2024. it complies with the reporting requirements of the SITFA Code of Practice for Treasury Management. Our actions are that we review the report and pass any comments on to the Leader of the Council, Executive Councillor for Resources, Communications and Commissioning. This report will be presented by Karen Tong, Treasury Manager. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. As just stated, this report compares the activity, Treasury activity and performance for quarter 2 to the end of September 24 and compares this to the strategy. But I am conscious that economic data and events have moved on since that end of reporting period, so I will comment on the latest economic position as well. The report is broken down into the 3 usual areas: interest rates, economy, investments and borrowing. So starting with interest rates and economy, the detailed economic analysis you can be found in Appendix A, page 177 of your pack, but it shows that the movement of short-term and long-term interest rates to 21st of October at the time of writing the report. And it can be seen that the MPC cut the base rate on the 1st of August by 0.25% to 5% at that time, which signalled the start of its easing cycle. And this was very much in line with market forecasts now and at the time of the strategy. But as I mentioned, there's been various events that's happened since the end of September, albeit that we had the budget on the 30th of October. We've had the result of the US elections, and economic data has been posted with CPI inflation increasing higher than expected at the last data set. All these sort of events have been seen as inflationary. So the forecasts for the projection of rates were at the time in the report showing that base rate will be cut again in November and would end the year at 4% and 3.25% by the end of 2025. Because of the inflationary events that have been posted since, forecasts have changed, and it's the timing of the rate cuts that have been affected, and rates are now forecast to be cut slower, and so by the end of the 24-25 period, they're now shown to be about 50 to 75 basis points higher than previously forecast. Link Asset Services, our Treasury Management advisors, did issue a revised forecast on the 11th of November, which shows this picture, and they also expect the next cut in base to be February now, and for rates to end the year around 4.5%. Long-term rates, same picture. They're 50 to 70 basis points higher than they were in previous forecasts. It's worth pointing out, though, that these forecasts are very much data-led and will focus on inflationary pressures and data going forward. So turning to investments, cash balances stood at just below 237 million at the end of September, still some 20-25 million lower than previous year at this time. The weighted average maturity of investments have increased slightly to 135 days, as some longer term investments were made to lock into rates before they fall. I will note, though, the ability to make longer term strategic investments will decline towards the end of the year due to liquidity tightening, and hence the weighted average maturity is expected to fall from this point going onwards. I'm pleased to say again that investment return was more or less maintained at 5.44% for the quarter, despite the falling rates. I'm also pleased to say that we've exceeded the SONIA benchmarks and that of the link benchmark counterparts again. If you want a detailed analysis of the investments and the portfolio, that can be found on Appendix B on page 181. There have been some minor adjustments to investment counterparty credit limits over the quarter, and I'll just report that there's now no investment exposure to Close Brothers, who were removed from our list earlier in the year. And finally, turning to borrowing, the borrowing requirement for 24-25 has now been adjusted for carry forwards, target changes and rephasing. Importantly, changes to the capital financing requirement brought forward from last year, together with changes to estimated working capital and reserve balances, has moved the debt liability forecast for the year from an underborrowed position of 22 million at the time of the strategy to now an overborrowed position of around 80 million. And that's significant because it now means that it's now not necessarily to borrow externally again in 24-25. So with borrowing rates on have increased, but still on forecast to fall, this decision not to externally borrow supports those market conditions at present. The level of external borrowing, therefore, projected for the end of the financial year is 449 million at a cost of just under 3.7%. There's been some small amount of temporary borrowing that was taken in the quarter to support liquidity at a cost of just over 5%. This is normal activity for this time of the year, and it will all be repaid before the end of the financial year. No prudential indicator limits were breached during the period. And if you want more detail on the borrowing position and the debt liability benchmark, that they could be seen in the appendices attached, Appendix E and F on page 199 and 201 accordingly. So that's all I've got to report on. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. It's a general question, really, on investing and lending. How do we continue to monitor that we don't invest in anything or lend to anyone that we shouldn't be doing? So I just want reassurance on how that is actually managed, because obviously I'm a bit new to this committee, and it's something that's always in the back of my mind. Thank you.
Yeah, we have robust procedures in place. We have an authorised lending list that stipulates the amount, limits and the maturity limits of any counterparties on that list, who to lend to. I've formulated that list in conjunction with our advisors. So I know who to lend to and who to not. That's managed. If we have systems in place as well which record the detail of the lending, and so if it's likely projected that you do go over limits and things, that those systems will flag up. But mainly it's dealing in accordance with the procedures and the rules we've got. So
yeah, thank you. I think probably I didn't make myself clear. It was more on the ethical side, really, as lending or investing in things we shouldn't be investing in, rather than dodgy lending or investing, if you know what I mean.
Well, again, the types of products that we can invest in are stipulated in the Treasury strategy at the start of the year. And
we're mainly investing in banks, aren't we? I think that's probably the point with credit rating.
Yeah, every counterparty has an appropriate credit rating that's been established. We tend to lend fixed deposits in the money markets. We do it, we don't. We have a very low risk profile, and so we are not able to lend in equities or bonds or things with a higher risk level, even though they might have a higher return. So basically, all the rules that I have to follow are stipulated in our Treasury strategy at the start of the year, and that's what we follow to maintain that risk profile.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Okay, I've got one that's very brief. Are officers content that they and Link Assets believe the costs of borrowing will still fall when suggested, given that interest rates have been kept the same and inflation has increased? What risk does this pose to both our capital and revenue budgets, both in the short and long term?
Well, I don't think you'll find any economic participant that will put, you know, their shirt on the path of interest rates, but they look at the market and look at all the indicators, but they also caveat every forecast with, you know, it all depends on the data and what happens and events and so forth. So that's as sure as they can be, but obviously, you know, no one's going to put their shirt on it, if you see what I mean. So, but the risks, obviously, to higher interest rates, I think we've mentioned before that, you know, it benefits us in terms of investments that we've got, and we manage the borrowing by the timing of the borrowing and the length of the borrowing that we undertake if we have to undertake any. So we, for example, we'd keep borrowing short if interest rates were set to fall but didn't fall yet, you know, so we don't lock into higher rates for an extended point of time. So that's how that risk is managed, really.
Thank you. I'll ask one final time. Members have any questions? Seeing none. So I will go to the proposal and move from the chair that we endorse the report and ask that officers submit our comments that have been captured to the Leader of the Council, who is the Executive Councillor for Resources, Communications and Commissioning, for consideration. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. And I will ask just any against and abstentions. No, so that's unanimous. On to item 14, the Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. These reports can be found on pages 203 to 222 of the agenda pack. This report sets out the work programme of the Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee, Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee, Flood and Water Management Scrutiny Committee in accordance with the Board's agreed programme. Our actions are to record our satisfaction with the activity undertaken and endorse the activity plan for 24-25. The first one will be the Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee, and I understand the Chairman isn't present, so I'll pass over to Chiara to pass the report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I will take the report as read, and I'm only going to summarise our debate from just 2 days ago, which was the committee's last meeting held. At that meeting, the committee considered several key initiatives and updates on several key matters. Firstly, the committee reviewed the economic investment programme set to begin in 2025. This is a 4-year programme which aims to address growth constraints in sectors such as food manufacturing, defence and advanced manufacturing, whilst supporting small businesses. The goal is to create 3,000 high-quality jobs with an estimated 20 million investment, largely offset by the revenue and capital receipts. Focus will be on balancing sectoral investments and addressing market gaps in districts such as West Lindsey, East Lindsey and Boston. Next, the committee covered the Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Programme procurement, where Lincolnshire is leading a 10 million consortium with 5.6 million from the Department for Transport. The programme will install 2,496 standard EV sockets and 152 rapid charging points across the county. The contract will run for 15 years, leveraging 75% private sector investment. There are challenges, particularly around rural grid capacity, but the process is progressing very well. The committee also reviewed the service level performance for Q2 of 2024 and to 2025, where we heard that businesses support exceeded targets, particularly through growth hub activities, and adult learner qualifications in key sectors outperformed our expectations. However, external funding was slightly below target. In terms of flooding, 69% of Section 19 investigations had been completed. Waste management was progressing well, with only 0.27% of waste sent to landfill, although recycling targets we heard needed still improvement.
Lastly, the committee looked at the greenhouse gas emissions report. Emissions have plateaued due to increased carbon intensity of the grid, but we heard that we have achieved 74% reduction in emissions since 1990, which is very positive. Ongoing initiatives, including car sharing schemes and digital solutions, aim to further reduce travel emissions. And this concludes the committee's update to you, and I'm happy to take any questions back to the chairman. Thank you.
Members have any questions? Seeing none. So I will then go to the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee and pass over to the Vice Chairman for this meeting, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since our last meeting to the board on the 29th of August, the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee has held 2 meetings on the 16th of September and the 28th of October, tackling key issues affecting our highways and transport services. Highlights of our work include monitoring Anglian Water's performance in managing street works, where improvements in limiting road closures and inspection pass rates were noted. However, we flagged concerns about the timelines of signage removal and communication with affected stakeholders. Reviewing the Highways Infrastructure Asset Management Plan for 2024, which included new measures for tree management and drainage maintenance. Transport performance has been another focus, which efforts to improve bus services and secure additional funding have been reviewed. We've also supported procurement process for statutory notices, emphasising need for cost efficiency and competitive bidding. In drainage maintenance, we've reviewed progress on gully cleansing and stressed the importance of prioritising works based on safety and property risk. In the coming meetings, we will delve into parking enforcement outside schools, major work schemes and quarterly performance reviews for highways and transport. The committee remains focused on improving infrastructure, service delivery and stakeholder engagement. This concludes my update to you and members of this board, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Yep, Councillor Kendrick.
It's more of an observation than a question. I note that there was a discussion about the removal of signs. That's something I get a number of complaints from residents, that we do some works which are fine, but then the signs remain there for some considerable time after the event, and I usually get it at parish council meetings. Why have the signs not gone? So I'm glad that's been looked at. And the other point, Mr. Chairman, was about TROs. I noticed there's a backlog, and the committee there sounds satisfied with progress on that. I hope that's the case. That sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I do totally get that point, and I know I certainly have had probably similar issues. I think we all probably have as county councillors. I mean, especially it has Anglian Water removing their signs seems to be a particular issue as well, if I'm honest. But anyway, not playing the blame game. Not playing the blame game. Okay, thank you.
Yep, of course you can, Councillor Jones.
Just following up on Councillor Kendrick's point, I mean, very good point. The moans I get a lot in my division is more to not just the signs, and I've actually been around and taken them down myself and stored them to be collected, and they've asked me not to do that for insurance reasons. But sometimes that's the only way of getting it done. But the more of a concern I have is traffic lights. You know, the traffic lights arrive the day before, hopefully, the contractors then turn up. But if the contractor then doesn't turn up, yeah, there have been cases of traffic lights being there pointlessly. And then all too often, I get reports of traffic lights not disappearing after the work has been completed for some days afterwards. And it's because, of course, the contractor doing the work isn't responsible for the traffic lights. It's another contractor. And so it's... they don't always marry up, if I could put it that way.
Yeah, I've certainly had that in my own division, Councillor Dilks, and in some instances it made, shall I say, road travel quite difficult because they weren't live when they should have been. So yeah, and the same with the signage. I regularly get complaints why has this signage been here? It's been here 3 or 4 weeks, and we are. I would say, you know, it's not just Anglian Water. We have it with our own signage sometimes as well. So it is a problem, and I'm sure we all get it, and we're all doing what we can. And I know the highway scrutiny is because I was actually subbing on that occasions. I don't see any further questions, so I shall. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ashton. I do apologise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is around the item that appeared on the agenda but was withdrawn regarding the Scrutiny B report, which was due to come to Highways, I think at the last meeting, picking up on traffic regulation orders and speed limit policies and that sort of stuff. I'm aware that that was very much close to the heart of Councillor Brooks when he was chairman of Highways, and it's been much anticipated. I can't see that on the list of planned activities for the committee. I don't know if you could give an update when the committee is expecting to debate that, please.
I think there was an issue with policy and wanted to make sure that there wasn't that overlay of between the scrutiny panel B and the scrutiny of our committee. But maybe Nigel wants to answer that.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it relates to the review of the Constitution to make sure that the two align together, to make sure there's no contradiction between the scrutiny review and the constitutional review. The two things are coming together. We're carrying out a little bit more work on those recommendations just to make sure there's no conflict. We don't want two different parts of the organisation saying two different things. So it's about making sure that they align, basically. And it should be coming, if it's not, it's going to be tight to get it back for the December highways, but it will certainly be at the January one to make sure it comes through before the end of this council term, sorry.
Councillor Sear.
I'd like to point it out about the roadside, the traffic light. I have lots of issue where my area is. You might see in the news about the Butcher Corner in Maversop. The traffic light there, I report it, but you should talk to your highway manager. They should help you out to move the sign and all the thing and post. I just checked my email. People report on Figmy Street. You know, one of them, we have Molly Lamar Street done because the diversion sign not very clear. So I have residents reported they want to claim £50 for the loose road to get to where he lived 13 miles for 50 quid. What you think about that? And I think your highway manager is the best sort to help out with your side and the traffic. I have that issue all the time, but I know I can get it sorted by contact your highway manager. I give credit to the highway committee. Even you in here, but you do a good job. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, it absolutely is the right way to go about it, and I've had experience of that, and I've contacted them, and it's been dealt with very quickly. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make a positive comment as well. I don't know if this is the right environment, but in the sort of area that I live, somewhere that's not rural, it's urban, but I have quite a lot of dealings with highways, and I have to say that they're always really good. They're prompt, they're helpful. I particularly commend Richard Fenwick and Will Wright, but they're the two that I come against. But honestly, they're helpful every time. They get things sorted out quickly. And when we have things going on like the atrocious fibre work, and we've now got Stapleford Avenue looks like it just looks like a bomb's hit it because they're digging it up for gas pipes. But do you know what? They come and they make sure that things are all right, and they keep me in touch with, and updated. And I just wanted to commend our highways teams. Thank you.
Not a problem. I don't see any further questions from members, so I will move to the Flood and Water Management Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Tom Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would draw your attention to pages 217 to 222 of the agenda pack. Since the last report to this board in March, the Flood and Water Management Scrutiny Committee has met on 2 occasions in June and in October, and a recurring topic for the committee is the impact of Storm Babette in October of last year and Storm Henk in January of this year, and that is, of course, in addition to the ongoing work of the Storm Impact Working Group, which the committee is working on, hopefully to conclude following a meeting that is scheduled for tomorrow. The County Council initiated a total of 301 investigations under Section 19 of the Flood and Water Management Act in response to these two storms. In each case, an investigation report will make recommendation to the relevant flood risk partners, but I stress that these recommendations are not binding on any of the organisations concerned. The committee will continue to receive regular reports from the Council's flood and water team on those Section 19 investigations. And I'm pleased to say that at the last Storm Impact Working Group, we did have something of a deep dive on those Section 19 investigations, just to reassure members there of just how complex those processes are, and the fact that the County Council does also have to sense check and guarantee that work has been done to the standard that's required. The committee continues to engage with flood risk partners, including the Environment Agency, Anglian Water and Internal Drainage Boards, the latter being something of an innovation over the last year, including those IDB partners that provide such a vital role across Lincolnshire. The Environment Agency has reported to us that the storm damage has included 13 breaches of main riverbanks in Lincolnshire. The Environment Agency has also reported that they received no additional funding from the government to fund these repairs. At the October meeting of the committee, we requested clarification on the status of all Environment Agency repairs, as several of these remain unfunded, several months after the last storm had passed. One example is a breach on the Horncastle Canal, in effect the River Bain at Tumby near Coningsby. In this instance, the local quarry owner will be repairing the bank at their own expense with the agreement of the Environment Agency. As reported to this board in February this year, the committee has established a working group whose remit is to look into more detail of the impact of those two storms, and as I said, we have a meeting tomorrow, and the plan is that the working group report will be presented to the committee in January of 2025. I would like to highlight another item on January's agenda, which is a presentation on behalf of the Local Government Association Special Interest Group on Internal Drainage Board levies. These are raised by district and unitary councils and included in the council tax requirement of those councils. For 2024-25, the 7 district councils are raising just over £15 million in these levies, which are then passed on to internal drainage boards in the county. And I'm sure you'll appreciate that that comes under the referendum cap of those district councils, putting considerable pressure on their revenue budgets, and we look forward to exploring this matter at the meeting in January. In addition, several members of the committee are intending to visit the Somerset Rivers Authority in January of 2025. The Somerset Rivers Authority was established in 2015 in response to the fairly devastating storms and floods in Somerset back in 2013. Some of you will remember Owen Patterson and his Wellingtons. And it is funded by what is called a shadow precept as part of the council tax in Somerset. And I think it will be very interesting to find out the impact of that organisation, what it's done since 2013, what it's been able to deliver on the ground in Somerset, and just how it works within their existing partnership structures. And I am conscious that Lincolnshire gave considerable advice to colleagues in Somerset at the time, and perhaps there's lessons to run both ways. So the committee members that are intending to go on that very much look forward to it, and I'm sure the committee itself will look forward to hearing back how that is progressing. I'm very happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I hope you'll indulge me because this is the only chance really I get to say anything about floods because I'm not on any of the scrutiny committees. The one thing that, well, one of the main things that was really clear to me with the floods last year was that people in general, the ordinary people out in the street, weren't clear about who to go to for help and who to report things to. And yes, I know that we all in here know who to go to, and I know that there are websites and Fix My Street and that, but if you're an elderly person and don't know what to do when there's a flood, I felt there was a real problem there, and this was brought back to me from councillors of our group as well. And I wondered if next time we know that there's a flood coming, if we can put out a press release that goes out on the radio, not just online, because there are lots of people who don't go online, lots do, but some sort of press release to go out on local radio so that people know who to phone, you know, what the numbers are, how they do it, because there was a real problem with this, and I'd just like to see that answered, please.
I'm sure that will be taken away. It's not obviously for this committee, but I take the point, and it's something I actually experienced when trying to help a resident during those floods, because for one reason or another, we were unaware of certain operations that the district could perform, and luckily in that instance I was able to get district council support to support that resident. And I know Councillor Ashton's taken this away through that committee, that we need to ensure that we are joined up and working together, and I know certainly in the case I'm referring to that has happened or was happening. That officer unfortunately has left the post now, so it makes it slightly difficult, but it was happening because he was having conversations with Richard Fenwick.
Just to say,
Yep.
Chair, it's not about what we're doing and who's doing what. I'm talking about the communication of it, effective communication.
Yeah, I accept that, and that will be certainly taken away because it's obviously not something we can do. Councillor Ashton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very happy just pick up on those points. And Councillor Lee is aware I am always prepared to welcome any member of the council where they've got an issue that's relevant to their ward, their community. If they want to come along to the committee and raise on that, then I'm always willing to use my chairman's discretion to make sure that happens. We are, I'm sure, the point that you've just raised, they have been raised during the Storm Impact Working Group process, and I'm sure will feature as we draw our thoughts and conclusions together. And I appreciate we've got Simon here who will jog my memory to make sure that we are certainly doing that when we meet tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ashton. Do members have any questions? Yep, Councillor Kendrick.
Firstly, I'd like to say I remember when I had some flooding incidents in my division, the officers were quick to come out, and I actually met an officer on site at the flooding of one particular resident's property, so I know that they worked very hard during that period. I just wondered if you could remind me of the number of reports. I should know this, but I've forgotten. You mentioned it in your report, but it's a significant number, and sometimes particularly when I go to parish councils, they're not aware that it's not just their area that's been affected. There's a whole swathe of the county that's been affected. If you could just give me the figure again, Tom, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you. The figure is 301 investigations, which I can't just remember the total figure, but it's around 800 internally flooded properties through those two storms.
Many thanks.
One final time, do members have any question for Councillor Ashton in relation to the Flood and Water Management Committee? And I'm seeing none, so I will move and go to the recommendations. I'd like to thank the presenters for their detailed reports and move that the board is satisfied with the work undertaken that's been recorded and endorse the work programme that has been developed to date. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sear. All those in favour? Thank you. That is unanimous. And I will go to item 14, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board Work Programme. The report is on pages 223 to 230 of the pack and provides overview of the content of our own work programme. We do not normally debate this item, and our action is merely to note the report, and I move that the report be noted unless there are any changes, and I'm not aware of any. Councillor Key.
Yes, I know we don't debate it, but could I ask a question? The meeting on the 19th of December, it looks like there's only one item on it. Are we going to cancel that meeting, or are we all going to come in for one item? Thank you.
At the moment, the meeting is in the calendar, but if it's felt nearer the time that there isn't enough business, sufficient business, then we could cancel it.
Could I ask, sorry, that that's done as soon as possible, because it is the week before Christmas and we've all got lots on, other meetings and things, and if we wait till the week before or 10 days before, it's a bit close. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman. One of the reasons that the meeting is in the calendar is in case there's a call-in, and that's why we always have to have it in there. But I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I would suggest that you could perhaps do other things that day.
That's famous last words, that now, Nigel. Councillor Lee.
Can I just say, Chair, from this side of the chamber, if officers and the Chair deemed it was appropriate to cancel that and do the business at another time, I'd be quite happy with that. And I've only got to come for 15 minutes.
Well, I won't voice my unpopular opinion that I did to the chairman, which is I would quite like it to happen, but but I am an oddball on that regard. No, I spoke with officers at pre-meeting, and we will have a determination, I would hope, before our normal pre-meeting of the overview and scrutiny meeting, so long before the week before, or long before the 19th. So you will have plenty of time to assess your diaries. If there are no other points to be made, I will declare the meeting closed and thank everybody for their contributions and thank the officers for their presentations and time. Thank you, and safe journey home.